Time to redo this pedal board. It's a Pedal Train 2. We're changing the power supply from this Pedal Power 2 Plus to the One Spot Pro, which has more outputs that can handle higher current. And I'm going to be taking all these old cable bases out because we're going to be doing some new ones, and the new ones are going to be screwed in, not just adhesive taped. So I'm going to get in here and pop these all off where it will let me. The frustrating things with these cable bases, the adhesive base, is sometimes they're really strong like this one is, which would have stayed on here. And sometimes that adhesive gives up the ghost, and there's never any guarantee. I think it's temperature dependent. But anyway, I'm going to take all these off, and I'm going to get all the old stick them off and places here where there used to be duct tape. So when we get all these off, then I'll show you how we do that. All right, once we get to this point, I use a little bit of heat. And that should just roll up like that. I'll go back. In these areas with all the residue from the tape, I'll probably have to use some Goo Gone, but a little bit of heat and friction with your thumb takes care of most of it. And any little bits of gunk like that, again, the Goo Gone will take care of. I don't want it to puddle up and run down and loosen the adhesive on the carpet side of this for the Velcro, but I can usually control it pretty well. Let me keep going and I'll show you the after. Everything's nice and clean now. I've got good clean surfaces to work with. I've put some tape here where the new power supply is going to go. And I lined up the opening for where the power plug goes. Got it centered, and I've made my marks here and here. And I'm gonna pre-drill. This supply comes with some self-tapping screws, but I find the self-tapping screws often need a little bit of a help. So I'm gonna use a small drill bit to start those holes. I'll get it really clean and precise with that, and then I'll use the self-tapping. So can't really do this on camera without a lot of setup, and I think you guys know how drills work, hopefully. If not, there are other channels for that. So these are attached. I wanted to show one thing in here. While I do the smaller hole in the aluminum with the drill, I find it, from a harsh experience, it's best to do the final screws by hand, because you really only have one shot with a machine screw into aluminum. And if you have too much torque, it'll strip, and you can either just spin out or break. So I find I get better control doing these by hand, and it doesn't take that long. Once the first hole is done, then the teeth of the screws will cut right in there. All right, that is a solidly attached power supply. Now the fun part, I've got to lay the pedals out where they're going to be. And I like to do the audio cables first. And most of those are just going to be from pedal to pedal, but a couple of them are going to have longer runs from one end to the next. And on those, I will be eventually putting little cable clamps in here and here to hold those securely, so in transit nothing's flopping around. But I like to do those at the end, but to measure the length, for something hanging from a volume pedal over here to a pedal over here, then maybe a distortion pedal feeding that volume pedal. I'll use blue painter's tape like that to hold the cable temporarily where I want it to be, and that can do the run. Say I was doing the run right here, and then I have enough slack to calculate to the pedal connection itself. If you've done this one or two times, that makes just enough sense that they'll be like, oh, light bulb. If you've done that hundreds of times, you'll be like, duh. But if you're not sure what I'm saying, as this progresses, it will become clear, hopefully. So I've got the general layout. I'm going to fine-tune the position so I want to have enough space between pedals. And some things are over here, even though this is not where they are in the signal path, just because the owner is right-footed. So the things that'll get hit a lot, the mute switch, the volume pedal, the functions on the halo to change presets and stuff, tap tempo, etc. The client's right-footed, so that will make a lot more sense for him in use. So the signal is going to start with the breakout box, which is going to have feed through for the audio, which will go from there to the input of the tuner. And it will also have 2 pass-throughs for TRS expression pedals for the halo and the reverb. He won't always use expression pedals with them, but if he wants to, he can then connect expression pedals to here. There will also be a 9-volt DC feed through on this box for powering a wah, which will go to the right of the board. He doesn't use a wah very often, but he wants to be able to add it as needed. So after the input box, it goes to the tuner. A note on this little Polytune 3 Mini. It's a fine tuner, but the small physical size means that it has a lot of wiggle on a Velcro board, especially here where you have the split between them, like on the pedal trains. There's just not a lot of surface area there. That's not my Velcro job, by the way. I always get a little more even than that. I might redo that to help and just give it a little more surface area. This is the Polytune that I use on my board. It's physically larger, takes up more space, but once it's on there, it doesn't have all that wiggle. It just has a lot more surface area, and it's wider than it is tall, whereas the Mini is just about as tall as it is wide, so it can move around a little bit. Anyway, after the Polytune, the signal is going to go to the Ego compressor by Wampler. That's his kind of always-on pedal, so it's going to be there. From there, the signal will go to the RC booster, then the Hotcake, then the Telos. So 3 different flavors of overdrive, actually 4 or 5 if you count all the features of the Telos. And these can be stacked, of course, in any configuration. The signal after the overdrives will go to the volume pedal, so he can do kind of swoopy things. The output of the volume pedal will go to the halo, which will be the prime delay, and it's over here on the right. Like I said, he's right-footed. He can change banks, he can do tap tempo, he can do all kinds of stuff with that. After that, it's going right now to this flashback. This spot is kind of the guest pedal because he has a lot of pedals, and sometimes he likes to change certain things out, and most of the things he likes to change out are reverby, delay things. So that can go there, anything else he wants, or he can use a flashback as a just straight up, always have a slapback or always have whatever that he doesn't have dialed into the halo. After that pedal, it's going to go to the Flint by Strymon for amp reverbs and amp tremolo effects. And, you can do some very non-amp-like things, especially with the plate reverbs and the hall reverbs and stuff. Very nice, versatile pedal. After that, it goes to the MXR reverb pedal, which does more stunt reverbs and how he uses it in terms of big, haunting, ringing out lush sounds and the shimmer effects that he likes. And I want to make sure he can reach this because if you press and hold this, it does different things. Anyway, the output of that goes to this radial big shot ABY pedal. So he can go between channel A and channel B or both of one of his amps, or he can choose between this amp and the other amp or both amps. And he has control over the ground, so there's no ground loops. The polarity, in case the speakers are wired differently, or just the inversions that happen within the circuit would tend to cancel each other out. And then you can also isolate the output should it be necessary. So for right now, I'm going to start with everything grounded, not shifting the polarity, not isolated on the output. Very simple stuff. If he was going to be changing channels an awful lot, I would probably put it over on the right and shift all this stuff to the left. I might actually do that. But the downside of that is if you have the outputs over here, it's nice to have the outputs on the left going to your amp and the inputs all on the right going to your guitar. It makes it less cluttery on stage. I may reconsider that while I have lunch. So I'm going to have a think on this before I commit to it. Got some Velcro to apply to these 2 pedals that don't have it. And it's got some Velcro to reapply to this Polytune. So, and then it's time, once I'm happy with where everything is in the space between everything, then it's time to make the custom audio cables connecting everything. After a lot of soldering later, I've got all but one connection completed. And I'll do this one and show you why this is a little bit tricky to do right, but worth it. And I'll show you the cable and connectors I'm using. For the most part, I'm using these square plugs. These are the number 4, which work with this, in this case, Canare GS4, which is great low capacitance cable, but it still has a nice jacket. It's very quiet. This is the interconnect box. So from here and here, these are feed throughs for expression pedals. This is a feed through for DC to power out to the wah. This is the input jack. Use a switchcraft there for good ground. A Neutrik over here, or a Cliff. This is a Cliff, I think. And these are Amphenols. That way the only connection made from ground to the shell is at the input. All these other grounds are isolated from each other. And it's shunted so that when nothing's plugged in, the input's muted. Otherwise you can get some buzz. And it's got this. I don't have any Velcro here because it had a little bit of wobble if I tried to do that. So that's going to get some dual lock once it's all completed and be in place there. And it'll be really rock solid. So I'm going to make a connection that goes from right here to the input of the compressor. I decided to change the signal path, go input compressor, compressor polytune, because this won't affect the tuning at all, but it does introduce a little bit of hiss that this will mute. So that's a little bit nice. And it just moves this down to where the right foot can get to it more easily. So I think this made sense for good layout. And I'm probably going to move the halo over a little bit closer to the polytune just to get this farther away from this. Yeah, little considerations like that. So let me get this connection made and I'll show you how the soldering is done. It's the same thing I did for all these others. All right, I want it to go like this, and the braid has to go to the left for these plugs. So I'll push the braid down. And then I will find the tool I've got around here somewhere. And on this side, I will break through those braids. The spiral shield cable is a lot easier to work with than the full braid like this. But the Mogami spiral shield I tried on this at first didn't have this black inner conductor here. Let me show you this once I get the shield pushed to the side. Just gotta get this all nicely twisted on itself. Doesn't have to be too fancy. But this black layer here is between the center conductor insulation and the ground, the shield. And this provides a lot of immunity to handling noise and microphonics, but it is conductive. So I want to strip it back. And I want to kind of pre-bend that and get a little bit of solder at the end there. Snip off just about that much. Here, I want to expose the center conductor and twist that up and tin that. All right, now here's where I get really fancy. Got an old pedal that doesn't work anymore. This came in a few years ago. It was defective. The company offered no real support. Kind of a dead issue. And told the owner it was not really worth fixing, and he just left it here. And since then, it's been used for soldering jacks and plugs. Now, this is the sleeve connection, which is tied to the shell, and that's the tip. So what I want to do is bring this through here, It's a little bit hard for me to do on camera because I'm looking at a distance rather than looking up close. My old eyes want to be close to things like that. Then bend that down and that back. And then I fish that underneath, kind of between the plug connection, the actual little bit of tab there and the shell, and get solder on both of that. Gives a nice, good, solid ground. That's not going to go anywhere. Now I'll solder the tip. And again, I'm much better at doing this when I'm not looking from a distance. Snip off the excess. That just folds over. This goes here. Get screwed in place. And it's not wanting to grab because I'm doing it on camera. I'm not hiding anything from you, I just have bad eyesight. That's right in the gap between my natural nearsightedness and what the glasses do for me. Because I'm working with this about 2 feet from my eyes, which is not optimal. Normally I get about 8 inches away and look over my glasses so I can see what I'm doing. That's one of the reasons I'm only showing this one on camera. Let me do the other end, and then I'll show you how I test it before I put it on the board. All right, first of all, I want to make sure I don't have continuity between tip and sleeve. I don't. Then I'll go sleeve to sleeve. I do. Tip to tip. I do. And I have a low battery warning. Let's see if I can get a better tip to tip measurement there. It beeped, but it did give me 0 ohms. All right, that's good. I know that the tips are connected, the sleeves are connected, and neither tip is shorting out to the sleeve. So this is ready to go on the board. I've done this on every single cable. Not a single one had a mistake, but it's better to be sure before you put everything in place and have a bunch of stuff that's tricky to locate. That's all the audio connections. I've got to do some tip ring sleeve connections from the halo and the reverb to here, but I'm going to do those last because that's one of the least important parts of it, at least for the initial setup. And I want to make sure that I don't need to do any weird normaling of either expression pedal setup so that when nothing's plugged in, these aren't freaking out at all, you know, like thinking it's toe down or toe forward or anything. It should be exactly the same as not having anything plugged into the expression pedals, but that can vary from pedal to pedal. So for that reason, I won't be fully securing this to the board with dual lock until everything is locked in and perfect and tested, which means I'm going to take this off the board for now, because otherwise it'll be flopping around. Everything else here is Velcroed in place rather than dual locked. Let me flip this over and let you see the other side. All right, here you can see the tape, which is temporarily holding these longer runs in place. I'm not going to worry about these short runs. If I really, really wanted to, I could get them secured there as well. I don't think that's going to be necessary. I might, just for neatness sake, because it's pretty simple to do, but I have to secure them to this rather than to this. But I'm not doing the adhesive pads. I'm going to screw actual cable retainers in place. It'll neaten all the AC stuff up. And I'm going to run the DC stuff away from all the AC stuff. It doesn't matter that much, but it's nice to have it done as neatly as possible, just to minimize such things. And that'll have a separate bunch of retainers for everything, routing everything neatly. And I'll try to do them on the front walls as much as possible. Here I won't be able to. And so these will be going this direction. Some of the DC stuff will be crossing it at a 90-degree angle. It's a little over the top, but that's how we roll. So that'll be in the next installment video on this particular board because it's a lot, and I think this is enough for now. So stay tuned to watch the DC connections made, and then everything tested, and then everything nicely clamped in place.